The city is burning, not from bombs or missiles, but from the slow, grinding collapse of every system you've ever relied on. The power grid failed 3 weeks ago. Water stopped running 2 weeks back. And now, as winter closes in or the merciless sun beats down, you're standing in the ruins with nothing. No tent, no tarp, no hammer or nails or rope. Just your hands, your brain, and the brutal reality that exposure will kill you faster than hunger or thirst ever could. You have maybe 72 hours before hypothermia or heat stroke begins shutting down your organs. This isn't a camping trip gone wrong. This is survival at its most primitive, and the shelter you build tonight determines whether you wake up tomorrow. Here's what most survival guides won't tell you. The romantic notion of building a perfect lean-to with freshly cut branches is a fantasy that will get you killed. In a real collapse scenario, you're not in a pristine forest with abundant resources. You're in an urban wasteland or a picked-over suburban sprawl where every useful material has already been claimed, burned, or destroyed. The physics of shelter are simple and unforgiving. Your body generates heat, roughly 100 watts, like a dim light bulb, and without a barrier between you and the environment, that heat bleeds away through radiation, convection, and conduction. When your core temperature drops just 3 degrees, you start losing the ability to think clearly. Another 2 degrees and your fingers won't work. You need to create a microclimate, a bubble of trapped air that your body can warm, using materials that seem worthless to everyone else because they don't understand the science. Start with the foundation principle. Small is survival. Every cubic foot of space you try to heat is energy stolen from keeping you alive. You need to think like an animal burrowing into the earth, creating the smallest possible space that still accommodates your body in a fetal position. This goes against every instinct screaming for comfort. But comfort is a luxury that died with civilization. Your shelter needs to be barely larger than a coffin because that's the volume your body heat can actually warm. Look for existing structures first, the skeleton of what came before. A collapsed wall creates an instant windbreak. The corner where 2 buildings meet forms a natural right angle that cuts your construction work in half. Underneath a concrete stairwell, inside a drainage pipe, beneath an overpass. These are the foundations that still hold structural integrity when everything else has failed. Now the material hunt begins, and this is where understanding thermal properties separates the living from the dead. Cardboard is your primary insulation layer. Yes, cardboard, that seemingly fragile material that people dismiss because it dissolves in rain. Each corrugated layer traps air pockets, and air is the best insulator available in an urban environment. A single sheet of cardboard has the insulating value of a 1/4 inch of wood. You need to scavenge every box, every shipping container remnant, every piece of packaging material, flatten them, layer them. Treat them like currency because they are. Create a floor platform first, because the ground will suck heat from your body through conduction faster than the air ever could. You need 6 to 8 layers of cardboard between you and the earth, compressed and overlapping like scales on a fish. This ground insulation alone can mean the difference between surviving the night and slipping into hypothermia while you sleep. For walls, you're building a debris hut without the luxury of natural debris. Plastic sheeting torn from abandoned buildings, trash bags split open and layered, old clothes stuffed into gaps. These form your outer weatherproof shell. The key is creating dead airspace between layers. Think of it as building a crude version of a sleeping bag around yourself. Inner layer of cardboard against your body. 6-inch gap filled with crumpled newspaper, shredded plastic, dried leaves, anything that creates irregular air pockets, then an outer layer of more cardboard or plastic to block wind and precipitation. The crumpled material in the middle is critical because smooth layers allow convection currents to form, cycling your heat away. Crumpled and chaotic materials trap air in thousands of tiny dead zones where heat accumulates. The roof is where most people fail because they build too large or too flat. You need a steep pitch, even in a tiny shelter, to shed water immediately. A flat roof becomes a pool that eventually collapses, destroying your shelter and potentially killing you in your sleep. Overlap materials like roof shingles, with the top layer covering the seam of the layer below. If you find metal sheeting, it's tempting but dangerous. Metal conducts heat away from your shelter so efficiently that you wake up colder than if you had nothing. You must insulate any metal with layers of cardboard or fabric before it becomes part of your structure. The same applies to concrete and brick. They seem solid and safe, but they're thermal sinks that will drain your body heat all night long. Now the psychological component, the part that breaks people faster than the elements. Building this shelter feels humiliating. You're crawling into what looks like a garbage pile, compressing yourself into a space that feels like a cage. Admitting through every action that you've been reduced to something less than human. This is the moment where your mind becomes your enemy. You have to accept a brutal truth. Dignity is not insulation. Pride does not block wind, and your self-image cannot raise your core temperature. The survivors are the ones who can perform these degrading actions without hesitation, who understand that shelter is a physics problem, not a reflection of their worth, while others are still searching for something that looks acceptable, something they could show another person without shame. You're already inside your cardboard cocoon, conserving energy, staying alive. The timing of construction matters more than you think. Build during the warmest part of the day when your hands still function properly and your mind is clear. Hypothermia begins affecting judgment long before you feel dangerously cold. By the time you're shivering violently, your cognitive function has already degraded. You'll make mistakes, forget steps, and leave gaps that seem insignificant but become fatal wind channels at 3 in the morning. Mark your shelter location mentally during daylight. In a collapsed city, navigating in darkness without landmarks or streetlights turns a 100-yard walk into a deadly maze. You need to be inside your shelter before sunset, fully committed. Because searching for materials in the dark is how people fall into unseen holes, cut themselves on debris, or get disoriented and freeze while wandering. Water management inside your shelter is the hidden killer. Your breath releases moisture with every exhalation. In a sealed small space, this condensation will soak your insulation, and wet cardboard has zero insulating value. You need ventilation holes near your head, small enough that wind doesn't blast through, but large enough that moisture escapes. This is a delicate balance. Too much ventilation and you lose all your accumulated heat. Too little and you wake up damp, which in cold conditions is a death sentence. Check your inner layers each morning. If they're wet, you must replace them or dry them during the day. This is non-negotiable maintenance. The reality that no one wants to discuss: your shelter will be ugly, uncomfortable, and barely functional. It will smell like mildew and decomposition. You'll wake up with your back cramped, your neck twisted, and your spirit crushed by the claustrophobia. But you will wake up, and that's the only metric that matters. Every night you survive is another chance to improve your situation, to search for better materials, to relocate to a more defensible position. The first shelter is just the beginning, a proof of concept that you can manipulate your environment using knowledge when tools have disappeared. This is the truth. They do put in survival manuals. Civilization collapse does create a picturesque wilderness adventure. It creates a desperate scramble for basic physics solutions in an environment designed for comfort that has become actively hostile. Your advantage is understanding that shelter isn't about construction skill or proper tools. It's about thermodynamics, material properties, and the willingness to do what looks insane to preserve what's rational: your continued existence. Build small, insulate obsessively, and never let pride interfere with survival. The prepared don't hope for rescue. They create microclimates in the ruins and outlast the chaos, one cold night at a time.